But let's now kick off this morning session with our very first presentation, and that will be a joint presentation in form, I think, a case study of sourcing platform Metalshub and stainless mill Outokumpu. And for that, I will welcome to the stage the two speakers, Julian Gatzweiler. He's head of raw material procurement at Outokumpu, having joined Outokumpu in 2020. He first established and was working in the group's transformation office. Before then moving on to raw materials, and since 2022, I think, leading the raw materials purchasing team for Outokumpu. Welcome, Julian.
Thank you.
So Julian will be accompanied by Christian Reuss, account executive at Metalshub. And you joined Metalshub in 2022, and prior to that you were working in international steel trading, being based in Düsseldorf, Dubai, Singapore, so quite an international footprint, as well as Salzgitter, I learned.
Correct.
Floor is yours.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So yesterday we've had a lot of discussions about the challenges of our industry, and the question that comes with it is, well, how do we get better? How do we get more effective? How do we become more efficient? And that is the question that I would also like to address and highlight one of the initiatives that we have at Outokumpu to address exactly that. As Gerhard said, my name is Julian Gatzweiler and I'm heading raw material procurement for Outokumpu. And the highlight, or what I would like to highlight today, is exactly of the what and the why we're doing to become better, to become more effective, to become more efficient in how we source. I'm here together with Christian Reuss from Metalshub, who will give you then some tangible examples on the how. So, before joining raw material procurement, I was working in consulting, specifically focusing on strategy, transformation, and business analytics. Upon joining raw material procurement only in 2022, being new to the function and the industry to that extent, it all started with one very simple and basic question. How good is my procurement organization? How competitive are we? How effective are we? How efficient are we? And how are we equipped to manage today's dynamics? Because the challenges are quite clear and omnipresent. I think they've been vastly discussed yesterday, and they will still be there tomorrow. So, the fundamentals have not changed, and they're not even industry specific. So how we work and how we become better focuses, to me, on three key pillars: people, processes, and tools. Assessing that, I came to the assessment, or the conclusion essentially, that we have a fantastic group of experienced individuals and a strong team across the company. However, the processes were vastly inconsistent. And the tools, yes, we're using tools, as everybody does, but how much in the end do you really still rely on Outlook and Excel to save the day? Right? And I think we all know what that can look like once it's needed. So we need to have a healthy balance between the three pillars, because if you don't, then in the end your experienced individuals are spending valuable time managing and compensating for the flaws in processes and tools. So if every flaw in process and tools needs to be overcome by experience, well then, how do you plan for succession? How to address succession in combination with personnel efficiency? Because as the complexity increases, well, we still need to be efficient. Performance, how to assess underlying performance while giving autonomy to senior individuals. As said, these are extremely experienced experts that know what they're doing. Well, how can I empower them to also give them the necessary autonomy? Manual work, right? Again, experts How much manual work should they be doing in managing the processes? How much time is being spent manually managing quantitative insights parallel to systems? Market time, right? I mean, I think that's what it is about in the end, to be in the market, understand where the opportunities lie, where the challenges lie. So how can I enable the lean organization to spend more time in the market while improving procurement efficiency and quality? And last but certainly not least, governance. How strong is my governance and compliance? So a clear understanding of the entire program was built on three key analysis aspects. First, the processes. So I looked at, well, what transaction types do we have? How do we work? How are they being processed? How does the ideal process look, and can we increase synergies? I mean, I think from a manufacturing base, everybody understands of how that works. How do I eliminate waste in my processes? And that's not necessarily solely about how do we manufacture, but also how we run the business. Then at the top level, it all comes down to three key basic aspects. You have your demand planning, your sourcing, and your procure to pay. So understanding then, of course, also in a much more significant detail than solely this, what you would like to do, well, then you can go in and set the requirements. How do I define then the perfect tech stack, i.e. the perfect solutions to support the organization and how they want to work? Connected end to end. And here we then have chosen the respective demand planning platform to identify our raw material demand. Sourcing, here we've licensed Metalshub to support us in digitizing our sourcing activities. And then, of course, integrating that directly to our ERP solution. And then lastly, governance. So confirming data structures, master data matches, etc. I think all of us have been through this at one point. But in the end, you need to make sure that the entire process is transparent and efficient across the individual steps. So that led to us seeing the need to split also, create a data layer in the middle, harmonize our processes, and bring all the information across the sourcing process together and make it available to the organization, to my team. And that then in the end creates the data warehouse and the respective live reports and governance. And what you see, this goes across the entire process. Because the thing is we're operating in a dynamic environment. Mm-hmm. And you don't know at which point in the process you face the challenge tomorrow. So you need to have efficiency, transparency, and availability. And that not only of your key categories, like the ones that we've seen here, stainless scrap, molybdenum, ferrochrome, but there's also a long list of smaller categories that we also want to give equivalent attention to. That is usually then something that becomes challenging when you're in a constrained resource environment from a people perspective. And a lot of these analyses then essentially have to be done manually. So what does this lead to? Well, we have a clear roadmap, a clear plan, a clear ambition, and what we want to accomplish with it, right? It is transparently communicated. And the organization understands the why, the how, and the what. And that is essentially where we're going to move. And now I would like to hand over to Christian to show us two tangible examples of the how.
Thank you. So a few years ago, Outokumpu approached several software vendors with a vision, with a very clear requirement. We want to digitalize the entire sourcing or source to contract process, regardless of the transaction type and regardless of the product category. And the first thing that we did was sit together with the team and map out the potential flows. What actually happens in between from receiving a spot demand or a purchase request from a plant to issuing a purchase order in the ERP system. And we basically came up on a high level with two potential flows. Either to consume materials that have been contracted in long-term contracts, that's the first flow, within the running contract duration, requesting a call-off and having the supplier confirm that call-off, which will lead to a purchase order. Or secondly, depending on the market dynamics, to enter the spot market, meaning sending out a tender, sharing it with your suppliers, collecting offers, comparing those offers, negotiating, and then contracting a spot order, which again leads to a purchase order. And I want to dive in a bit deeper and show you what it looks like in the systems that Outokumpu is using today, starting with the call-off request. You might argue that the first or the upper part of the flow looks a bit more straightforward than the spot one, but actually the complexity lies a bit prior to that, and that is getting complex long-term contracts, and many of you know these contracts are very complex in the system, and this is how we've solved it for Outokumpu. Outokumpu has stored and captured their contracts, their long-term contracts in a system. This is an example of a molybdenum contract, and the complexities can be there might be optional or optionalities for product categories. It can be made for moly oxide briquettes, for powders, for ferromolybdenum. Looking into one category, there might be even volume options, also very common in long-term contracts for raw materials. There might be different product origins because only in the running contract period the supplier knows from where they will supply. There might be different packaging types, many things that are not finalized by the time that you negotiate the long-term contract. There might be an optionality also in terms of the delivery period. The material could be, in the case of Outokumpu, either be consumed by the plant in Avesta, Sweden. It could be called off to the plant in Tornio or go to the plant in the United States. And capturing these complex long-term contracts is the fundament of what now happens in the running contract period. The local purchasing managers, the category buyers, and together collaboratively with the suppliers can now execute those long-term contracts, check the balances of the three products that we've contracted, indicating the volume options. And we can now see what actually has already been called off and consumed under confirmed, and what is remaining as an open quantity for call off. And now in the running contract period, you can create a call off. And now you narrow down the optionalities from the long-term contract, specifying that this particular call off, for example, goes to the plant in Sweden. You now specify which product group exactly or particularly are we calling off? What is in this particular delivery month my preferred packaging type? Very importantly, you specify the delivery month or the delivery week or the delivery day. The quantity, always checking what is remaining in my long-term contract, and the prices have been pre-negotiated. And just with that, with a few clicks, we have created a workflow for the supplier that can now review this call-off, confirm it, or reject it. And you can see that also in the balance up there that another 100 tons have been ordered. And once the call-off has been confirmed, we have all the data that are necessary for creating a purchase order. And since our systems are integrated and we're integrated into Outokumpu's SAP system, we can now send all the data automatically to the ERP system and automatically create a purchase order. This is what the process for long-term contract call-offs looks like. And maybe one more example on the spot flow. So the biggest complexity that we found and the most time-consuming process is receiving offers from a spot tender and comparing them on an apples-to-apples basis, making an apples-to-apples comparison, and therefore you need a feature to normalize the offers. And this is what it looks like in the system that Outokumpu is using. The spot tender on the left and showing the offers that came in, the three offers, in the columns on the right. You see highlighted in red where a supplier deviated from the terms, from the preferred terms of my inquiry. A different payment term was offered, a different Incoterm. One offer is based on FCA Rotterdam. One is made with a different packaging type. And it can get even more granular to sizes of the material and even you can visualize if the supplier has offered a different chemical composition of their material. So now you would say, maybe it's nice to have the offers all in one view to see first select to which terms do you want to normalize your offers to a DDP Avesta and US dollar basis in this case. And now the system calculates a total landing price, meaning for the first offer, there's a less preferable payment term, 60 days instead of 90 days, the system automatically adds financing cost. This will all be added to a total landing price, DDP Sweden in this case. The second offer is based on is a euro offer instead of a dollar offer. So first thing that happens is a conversion, a currency conversion. And now, since this is based on an FCA Rotterdam basis, the system will automatically add local transportation costs to bring the material from Rotterdam to Sweden. And now the final total landing price is indeed very much comparable to the first offer price. The third offer is actually based on an FOB basis. And what happens here is sea freight will be added from China to Europe, and inland transportation, maritime insurance in this case. And you can add more normalization data like insurance costs, import costs, duties, CBAM costs potentially in the future. And that all leads to a total landing price, which allows now for an apples-to-apples comparison. And you can easily award the order and see what is the best offer actually that we've received. This is how we've solved the problem of normalizing spot offers in a spot tender for Outokumpu. And before handing it back to Julian, let me maybe add one personal remark. At Outokumpu, we've worked with a team of highly experienced procurement managers, learning from them how their processes are run and what tools they need to spend more time on meaningful value-adding tasks was really a good experience. At Metalshub, we're building software for this industry, not to make anybody's life more complicated, but to help with not only compliant, but also easy, efficient, and automated processes. We want to give tools in the hands of very experienced procurement managers so they can spend time on what really matters. And I think that is the key achievement of this project.
Thank you, Christian. Excellent examples. And we have now, what does this lead us back to, right? Because in the end, people, processes, and tools. So we've created a more attractive work environment for future talents, right? Because the value is in the market. The partnerships are in the market. The relationships are in the market. The processes, consistent and harmonized. And tools, exactly as said, the experts can spend less time administrating and more time in the market. So we're not doing anything differently. We're just doing it more efficiently. Thank you. Shall we?